I'm Pearl Anzalani. We're recording. I'm a board member of League and editor of The Voter, our monthly newsletter, and my pronouns are she and her. We're so pleased that you are all able to attend this briefing, which is League E's for an informational meeting. For our guests, and I saw a few new names come by, the League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that's worked since the 1930s in Denver and 1920, of course, nationally when women got the vote, to improve our systems of government and impact public policies through voter education and advocacy. And our briefings throughout the League year, such as this one, serve to educate our members and voters and often lead to advocacy. So tonight, here's our agenda. It has my name too many times. I'll go through a few introductions, then we'll talk about upcoming briefings. So before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. As you noted, if you had to accept it, we're recording tonight. Please use the chat to ask questions during the briefing. We plan to have questions after each issue and also at the end. So be thinking of questions that you might have. The chat area, as many of you know, also turns out to be a good place for sharing information with each other. And very soon, Andrea and I are going to mute everyone so that we can hear all our speakers clearly. Andrea, is the next slide the upcoming League events? Yes. So I wanted to talk about this next. As you know, tonight we're doing the Denver ballot issues. The state ballot issues will be
Wednesday,
October
19th.
I was going to say, yes.
Today's Tuesday.
Right. So tomorrow, the October 19th, will be the state ballot issues briefing at 6:30, and then another one on Wednesday, November 2nd. And I believe they're the same, repeating, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you can register at League of Women Voters, lwvcolorado.org to attend those. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, the League encourages informed and active participation in government, and we hope to influence public policy through education and advocacy. And this dual mission of voter education and advocacy guides our briefings. Of course, one of the best ways we accomplish voter education is our pro-con brochures for ballot issues. And they provide nonpartisan information about the issues on which we all will be asked to vote in the upcoming election. Of course, this is a monumental effort each election season. And once again, this year was spearheaded by our co-chairs of voter service, Jeanette Scotland and Ann Duncan. They've done an amazing job leading the whole effort. And then these amazingly well-received documents, which I have, and you can see here, the paper ones, were researched and written by a very talented group. Diane Young, Liz Brown, Jeanette Scotland, Tom Stewart, Catherine Waters, Bobby Heisterkamp, and Andrea Mitchell. And of course, Fran Coleman and Lila Conley contributed in numerous ways as well. So these pro-cons are available in our traditional paper format, which I showed moments ago, but are also, of course, available on our website. I'll put the direct link into the chat where you can find them. So on the website, you can read them there. They're there in their full text, but you can also download a version to print on your local printer if you'd like to have it locally. And I just want to ask you to consider sending an email to friends and family with the link to that page or with the downloaded file so that these get out far and wide. We also, of course, encourage all voters to use the vote411.org voter guide to understand the full ballot, and I'll put that in the chat as well. I know Ann Duncan works very hard to get our local issues and candidates in there. So tonight we will hear about these seven Denver initiatives that are on the screen right now that will be on your ballot, and you'll be hearing directly from some of the leaguers who worked on them. So the next slide, I believe, talks about how these appear on your ballot. So they come in two different ways. A referendum is a proposal by City Council, which is then referred to citizens for a vote. An initiative is a proposal by citizens that gather the required number of signatures to get it on the ballot. And as Bobby put here, it's 9184 currently.
Yes.
And then issues may be of two types: amendments to the city charter and amendments to the revised municipal code. So that's it for me in the introduction. I will see you again with questions and in the chat. And I believe we're starting with 305 and Liz Brown.
Liz, I'm going to mute everybody, so you're going to have to unmute yourself. Okay.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. All right, I am discussing initiated ordinance 305, also known as no eviction without representation for Denver, NEWR. This measure would be an amendment to the municipal code. It would increase the Denver excise tax, which would be paid by landlords on each individual residential property held out for lease in Denver in the amount of $75 per year per such property. The tax rate would change yearly, but not exceed the Colorado Consumer Price Index. This is a good deal of money, as you might figure. There will be exemptions for landlords living in a property or allowing family to live in a property and have 2 or fewer renters living in their property. All the revenues collected from this would be used to fund the administrative costs of the tax, and most importantly, run and fully fund a program that would provide legal representation for tenants who face eviction and its administrative proceedings. The program would be administered by a legal services and assisted coordinator, along with a committee of 7 tenant type people, which is many people, who would be paid a stipend of $1,000 a year. And they would sit with the coordinator and work out all the various issues with the program and the choices of tenants and so on. This initiative has been created by those who recognize that eviction became a critical issue during the pandemic. Some of you may wonder about this. The Denver City Council did pass an ordinance in 2021 to offer legal support for eviction defense. However, the newer people say this program is for those who make less than 80% of the area median income. Newer would provide access to legal assistance for all tenants facing eviction. Supporters of this measure believe that this program would reduce homelessness, prevent unjust evictions, and keep families in their homes. The landlord-tenant system is not an equitable one. Fewer than 1% of renters have access to legal help in comparison to 90% of landlords. In New York, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Boulder, which have similar programs of simple access to legal representation, eviction rates have dropped by half. Those opposed to this issue say Colorado's multifamily housing providers claim that landlords often try to avoid eviction. And they claim that the historically low eviction rate in 2022, as they see it, has been through the efforts of landlords. Landlords point out that the funds will go to lawsuits, not rent payments, and that the program is funded by housing providers rather than society as a whole. The total collected from the tax is much more than needed for the purpose. The tax adds to landlords' expenses, of course, and will inflate tenants' costs further if they up the rent because of this tax. Further, tenants receive many types of funding from federal, state, and local sources, the landlords feel. Any money appropriated should go to rental assistance programs that will help pay rent, not attorney's fees. So that's it in a nutshell.
Any questions? I don't see any in chat. We can collect them for the end too, if you'd like.
Hi there, I'm Bobby Heisterkamp, and I worked on Waste No More, which is an initiated ordinance, which means that signatures were gathered in order to get it on the ballot. This was actually approved last year. Some of you may be confused by seeing it again this year, but at the last minute, the proponents decided to wait and put it on the ballot this year. They thought it would get more attention. One of our problems in Denver and in Colorado is we have a very poor record of recycling. We only recycle 16% of the waste, and the rest of it goes into landfill. And the rest of the nation has an average of 35%. So I mean, that's a major problem. State law currently prohibits the city of Denver from collecting compost and recycling materials at large apartment buildings. What do I mean by large apartment buildings? Well, a recent law was just passed by the council, city council, that said 8 or more units are the large ones, and 7 or less units they will collect. The city and county of Denver will collect, recycle, and compost from. So we're talking about the larger buildings. Food, and there's other areas that are in this is the background. Food and cement companies also comprise about 89% of Denver's solid waste. Cement companies, discharge, throwing away. So they are also included in this. And there's no requirement that they be that the construction people need to recycle. There's no requirement. So let's start with, what does this do? The major provisions are that multifamily dwellings, and we just talked about it, anything more than 7, no, back up one slide. Thank you. Would be required to offer recycling services. Non-residential premises and food waste producers will also be required to offer recycling services. Next, retail food mobile license holders will be required to provide recycling services and organic material diversion, and will be prohibited from improper disposal of fats, oils, or grease. Special event license holders will be required to provide recycling services and organic material diversion, and they are also required when they get their license. This is going to be part of their license obligation. They need to submit a waste management plan. Next, construction and demolition activities will be required to separate and recycle materials that are recyclable, and to submit a recycling and reuse plan. The plans that we're talking about go to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, or DOTI, and they will establish rules and penalties for non-compliance. The major, the people who put this on the ballot those in favor say that the measures would upgrade access to recycling and composting services to those living in apartment complexes, as well as those who are patronizing businesses and special events. Apartment complexes with 8 or more families, businesses, and construction sites generate 82% of Denver's waste, as we mentioned before. Yet there's no policy making them mandating sustainable management. The measure would modernize the practices of construction and demolition companies and would create diversion plans that often create new construction materials. In other words, taking the leftover stuff from a site, a construction site, it could be used for a future construction. And recycling and composting are energy efficient practices which create long-term employment and a resilient local infrastructure, and actually improves the economy while reducing our impact on the climate. So we've got a big bundle there of good things. Those who are opposed say that large apartment complexes will have to hire private recycling companies because I just mentioned Denver is not, by law, is not allowed to pick up any trash or recycling from those large buildings. So in order to do the large buildings, we'll have to hire a private concern to do that. Businesses and mobile retail food enterprises will have to hire private recycling and composting services as well in order to get this requirement. And construction and demolition companies will have to provide transportation of the recyclable construction materials to appropriate sites, and increasing the cost of construction. So that is the plan, that is the initiative, and I would be glad to entertain questions if anybody has any.
There's one question, Bobby. Does DOTI already have a plan, or will this mean more time spent after the approval of 306?
As far as I know, DOTI will have to wait till it's approved. I can't imagine that they're working on it now, because if it doesn't get passed, they won't have to do this. So as far as I know, they do not have a plan. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, onward and upward.
Hi, I'm Andrea Mitchell, and I researched the sidewalks initiatives, which is people are referring to as Denver Deserves Sidewalks. That's also the group that I think sponsored it. What this would do is, well, let's just say, whether you know it or not, you're responsible for maintaining the sidewalk adjacent to your property. And if you, according to the rules in Denver, if you don't keep a safe sidewalk, they will send you a notice, and then it's up to you to fix it. As we know, those of you who are walkers, that doesn't work out so great sometimes. In lots of areas of the city, there are no sidewalks, or they're narrow, or they're not kept up, but they're covered with weeds and dirt and so forth. So the Denver Deserves Sidewalks people would like to initiate a fee system to help fund sidewalks. I wanted to spend just 1 second telling you the difference between a fee and a tax. This is a fee, which means that people would pay it to take care of their sidewalks, and those fee dollars can only be used for sidewalks. So unlike your property taxes that are used for a lot of things, this is a fee that's collected along with your property taxes. So what this thing would do would remove the responsibility for taking care of your sidewalk, whether you're a commercial business or a private property owner, and place it with the city. You would pay an annual service fee based on the linear footage of property that you have that has sidewalk on it. And the service would be based on the type of property. So for a residential property like mine, for example, I have 25 feet facing the street. I would pay a little over $2 and something per foot per year. So a little over $50 a year fee for the city to maintain my sidewalks. And there are varying rates for other commercial businesses and large, gigantic businesses. There are discounts available for low income areas that have already been designated by the city through the NEST program. Here are the rates. It's $2.15 per linear foot for someone like me, $3.58 cents a foot is the highest rate for large commercial arterials. They're expecting that this would collect a $41 million a year that would be used to first create a plan for upgrading and replacing sidewalks in Denver, and then ongoing after that point, using that master plan to take care of sidewalks. So why do people think this is important? The proponents talk about three major things: safety. So if those of you who are walkers know you can trip over our sidewalks, or some places there aren't any sidewalks. Accessibility, in particular for people with walkers, wheelchairs, children in strollers and so forth. Many of our sidewalks don't meet ADA standards for sidewalks, and so that's an issue for the disabled. And fairness, the issue in many cases is that in lower income neighborhoods, the sidewalks are worse than they are in neighborhoods that have higher income housing or commercial businesses. So fairness is an issue as well. So those are the three reasons that the proponents say this should be passed. The people who don't think this should be passed say that the city should just take care of the sidewalks like they're supposed to, and people should comply with the existing rules. They say that some people, especially low-income people or people on fixed incomes or people with large lots or people with big corner lots, would have a difficult time paying this fee. And then I've also heard people say that they have already fixed their walks and they don't think it's fair that they're assessed the fee because they already fixed their walks and it cost them a lot of money. I also heard something in my email, I think it was from the Denver Gazette, saying that they don't think that the city doesn't think that 9 years is nearly long enough to get this plan put together, and it's going to take more like 30 years. So a little extra con there. So that's it for sidewalks. Are there any questions for me?
There was a question. So if the sidewalk in front of my house was in disrepair and needed to be replaced, I would not be assessed the cost to replace my sidewalk if the ordinance passes.
That's correct. It would be the city's responsibility.
I don't see any others at the moment. There's one for Bobby that we can do a little later.
Okay.
All right, I'm Diane Young, and actually I'm filling in for Catherine Waters on this issue because she's the one that worked on it. And this is a referred measure for a Denver public library tax. This came to council a few months ago from the library, the head librarian. They'd had a task force that had been looking into strategic planning for the libraries. And they came up with a plan that would increase property tax that would be a stream just that would go to libraries. The reason for this is the libraries, as you know, are a cornerstone of the Denver community, playing an integral part of the city's priorities. And we know that libraries are used for many more things than just getting books. People use them for all kinds of stuff. They go to the libraries to use the computers, they can look for jobs, they can study if it's hard to study at home. I know during COVID, I know there was opportunities for people to be able to use libraries. There's just so many things. And as you know, the city is grown tremendously. So the librarian so they brought this to council. Council sent them home and said, do a little more tweaking. And this is what they came up with, came to council, and council referred it to the voters. So it is a referred amendment. And what they want is a 1.5 mil for a dedicated amount that would go to the libraries. This would be approximately $4.19 a month on an average house of property. As you know, this is based on property tax. So they think it would generate about $31 million a year. And it would just go, right now, the library just comes out of the regular city fund. So these are some of the things that they think it could be used for. It would be used for increasing pay for staff, increasing technology services, which is ever more important, enhancing programs and services for children and youth in communities of color, immigrants and refugees. It would expand resources for those who are looking for jobs, and it would expand hours and days for library branches. Many of the branches are only open till like 6 o'clock at night. And that's a time when people need to come after that time, after work, to use it, to study. And then it would expand collections of books and media and other popular things. This is the things that they may be used for. And since we had reduced hours in the past, it would be nice to have them open on nights and weekends. So the things that the pros for this are: the library serves people from all backgrounds, all circumstances, and free of charge. It's a vital community resource. And the Denver Public Library's strategic planning process established a plan on how best to support Denver's dynamic community. But the way it's currently funded entirely through the city's general fund does not have the financial resources needed to fully support current and future needs as the city grows, as you can imagine. Those opposed say the library funding should come through the general fund's annual budget rather than a property tax assessment. This really only came for very few people. There was no organized opposition to this. And that's really all I have on that.
There is one question. Would the city
Okay.
continue to fund the libraries through the general fund as well?
I can't answer that question. I would imagine that would be a totally separate thing, but it's something maybe we can find out.
And then who decides how this money gets spent?
That is also a good question. I don't think I can answer. I don't have the answer to that, I'm afraid.
My name is Lori Matthews and I'm
Yeah.
here from the campaign.
Yes, I saw that.
Don't
Yeah.
need to say anything, but if you need me to answer anything, I'm happy to.
Okay,
And thank
that's
you.
great. That's great. Thank you. I think those are things that will be decided when it passes. And that's really all I have on that.
Unmute. Okay, so I am Tom Stewart. Am I unmuted?
You are, you're good.
I'm addressing the referred measure 2J, which lifts Tabor limits on the climate tax. In 2020, the city council wanted to create a climate protection fund, and they asked citizens for a 0.25% sales and use tax to fund it. And the citizens voted they approved that by about 65% of the vote in November. They estimated that this would produce about $40 million in revenue, and it overshot. In 2021, this 0.25% tax raised $41.3 million. And as we know, with Tabor, that money has to go, can't be spent without citizen approval. It has to go back to the citizens. So in 2022, this election, the city council voted unanimously to ask for citizen approval to spend the money that's already been raised and to continue raising that money in the future on the 0.25% climate action tax. So what is the Climate Protection Fund? What's the money been used for would be a reasonable question. The Climate Protection Fund during 2021 was committed to $18 million for community solar, 1,000 paid positions in workforce development programs, planting 2,000 trees, free shuttle to help Montbello residents access transit, co-creating climate and environmental justice solutions with historically underrepresented communities, and retrofitting the Forum Apartments to an all-electric building. So to summarize, it does two things. It allows the city to spend the extra 1.3 million already collected and allows the city to continue to impose the 0.25% sales and use tax and collect that in the future. And I didn't find any organized opposition or support for this. That's all I know. I'm done.
Okay, any questions? To Jay? We will have questions at the end. I know I missed a couple. I'm keeping track. We'll have a big question, one at the end. There is one here, Tom from Cindy. Did the auditor have an overview of the program recently?
I don't know. Does anybody else know?
If somebody does, we can put it in chat too.
The annual report, we do have their annual report from 2021. It could well be some auditing involved in that, producing that report, but I don't really know.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Jeanette?
Okay,
Oh, there you are.
yes, okay, I'm Jeanette Scotland and I'm handling a fraternal twin measure. This is essentially the same procedure, but this is a referred measure to lift the tabor limits on the homeless resolution tax that also passed in November 2020. And that money brought in, that tax, a 0.25% sales tax and use tax, provided $1.3 million in excess of the projected 41 million. And so that also must be resolved by voters if the city is going to continue to use this. What has happened with homelessness in the city? Well, we know that it's really a crisis situation, but homelessness is up 30% from 21 to 22. And first-time homelessness doubled between 2020 and 2021. So some people believe that this is really a dire necessity to have this fund. What it has been used for to date is sheltering services, giving people immediate temporary shelter. Also for providing some housing that's a little bit longer term, and support services such as helping people to find employment or permanent housing. And case management, which is something similar to that kind of a support service. They have also, with support services, done some mental health counseling. So what this provision has asking for people, the main provisions is that it authorizes the city and county of Denver to continue to collect this tax to the full extent possible, 0.25% as voted on in approval by the voters in 2020. Then also, in 2021. And then it also encourages the city to, it doesn't encourage, it allows it to continue to collect that tax and to continue to spend all the revenues. There are people that were in definite support of this, the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, and they urged that this makes homelessness a rare and brief event, and that the Homelessness Resolution Fund, which was created by this tax, provides a critical financial resource for a full support of many services, such as prevention to prevent homelessness, outreach to find people who are homeless, to give them transition support services as they move from homelessness into some kind of sheltering system, retention to help them stay within some kind of a housing situation, and then also to get some aftercare so that they can maintain being housed. And that this really helps the Denver Office of Housing Stability, HOST, to continue their work to resolve homelessness in alignment with their approved plans. There was no organized opposition to this measure that I could find. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions should anybody have them.
All right, there was one, Jeanette. Does approval funding for 2J and 2K have any end, or is it forever?
It continues, to my understanding, because it says, the second says it authorizes the city and county of Denver to continue to collect the tax. And they talked about that it's only in the first year when it overcomes the initial projected amount of money that is eligible for refund. And beyond that, there is no more further needing to be, additional funds need to be treated like they are here. So it would be a continuation of this tax.
I did want to mention too that pay attention to the chat, because there are some comments coming in there too. Kathy Yates put in a link, and Bobby Heisterkamp had a note here that important part of 2I and 2J is that the city can keep the money over the estimates from 2020 and collected in 2021. All right, Diane.
All right, I'm going to do 2L, which I worked on. Actually, it was really interesting. I got to follow this committee. It was a ballot issue improvement committee that was started by the county clerk, some council members. It included staff members, people from the community, which was great. And it met for several months. And the idea was to modernize elections. The city has grown tremendously, and the work of the county clerk's office and elections office has grown as well. So they're trying to do some things to modernize it. So the title is, shall the charter of the city and county of Denver be amended to modernize procedures for access to the ballot in citywide elections by requiring initiatives to contain only one subject. It updates deadlines for candidate nominations to match mail-in ballot procedures, requires the clerk and recorder in consultation with the city council staff and the city attorney to set titles for an initiative, and removes unnecessary detail in the charter regarding wording of ballot questions, allows ballot question wording to be addressed by city ordinance instead of the charter. So as I said, this was something that the committee met for months and discussed many, many issues. And one of the big things was that they wanted to comply with the national election law, which is uniformed and oversees Citizens Absentee Voting Act. And it requires ballots to be mailed overseas no later than 45 days before an election. The other changes are for clarification of the ballot issues. So it really is important that they meet these deadlines. And up until, well, if this passes, the city council has been able to do referred amendments to right up to close to the election time, hardly giving them time they want time to look at it, check, they have to check signatures, they have to write things up, they have to have it translated into Spanish. There's so many parts that are important. So one of the big things I think that trying to make it very easy was that it shall not contain more than one subject. Right now, there's no such thing in the city ordinance. There is at the state level. And then it changes the petition time for, as I said, for council to be referred within 90 days after they pass an ordinance, so that it gets to the county clerk's office much, much quicker. And those are some of the main things. There was a lot of discussion back and forth of who should be responsible for what. Should the clerk be the one to fix the title? But it turns out that he's doing it in consultation with council staff and legal staff. And that seemed to be okay. So those in favor say moving the deadlines for candidate filings will allow the elections division to validate signatures in time for printing ballots. And in order to comply with national requirements for mailing overseas ballots, it's necessary to extend the timeline for a candidate petition and vacancy elections farther out from the election dates. Requiring a single subject for an initiated ballot measure makes it easier for voters to understand the issue and is consistent with City Council requirement for a single subject for referred measures. In other words, the City Council has to use only single subject, but initiated ordinance up to this point have not had to. And it allows the clerk and recorder to set the title, which will more correctly express the true intent of the measure. And there was no organized opposition to this measure. It came through council and they voted unanimously to move it forward to the voters.
Okay, there is one question from Marty.
Yes.
This referred measure requires initiatives to contain only one subject. Is that
Yes.
not true also for referred measures, since there seems to be several subjects in the measure?
My understanding is that the council has to have one subject. This particular issue has a lot of things. I go, the subject is ballot issue modernization, but as a rule, they can only refer one issue at a time, one title at a time. That is my understanding.
Other questions for 2L? Okay, then I'll go back up and get the ones that we missed before. On 305, Liz, one committee for the whole city is a question. Liz, are you there? Maybe I'll come back to that one. Bobby, there was a couple for you on 306. I see you say in the brochure that this has nothing to do with the new law charging for regular residential trash pickup in Denver. However, I think people may have questions about that law. How will that work, and will recycling and composting now be free?
Yes. The law, of course, applies to 7 units or less or single family, because this is Denver City and County municipal pickup. What they're going to do is have 3 size bins for waste. One is small, one is medium, one's large, and $9 a month for the small, $13 for the medium, and $21 for the large. This is to try to get people to stop throwing things into the waste stream. And the question about the composting and recycling bins, they are still going to be free, with the addition that recycling is going to be twice. It's going to be instead of twice a month, it's going to be 4 times a month. It'll be every week. So recycling will be picked up more often. My recycle bin is always overflowing because it's every 2 weeks. So it will be picked up. And both recycle and composting will remain free, because that's what they want you to do. But it has nothing to do with the other measure, because that's for 8 families or more, which have to be a private pickup. It's not the municipal service. Did I explain that all right, Marty? Yeah.
You did fine, except for claiming that the recycling and composting would be free. They would be included.
They're included, right? Except obviously, what if you put out no black barrel, you could still put out your purple and green barrels. There wouldn't be any problem. You
Right,
wouldn't have to pay anything. Okay, if you could get it down to where everything is recycled or composted, you'd be fine. You wouldn't have to pay the fee. Yep. That's how I have the brochure here that I got from the city. So I'm really quoting right from that.
So there was a question too on whether you thought the city would take over recycling from the large residential commercial buildings, or will private contracting continue indefinitely?
They won't. They're not allowed to by state law. This municipal government may not pick up those larger buildings. So it has to be a private group. It has to be a private company.
And Andrew, I saw that you answered in chat the question about would these funds be used to build sidewalks where there aren't any, which was a yes, right?
Yeah, the answer is yes, but an interesting question because there are people who live in neighborhoods with no sidewalks who don't want sidewalks. So it'll be interesting to see if this thing passes.
Yeah, I have a coworker who really doesn't want a sidewalk to come in their area, and
Yeah.
and she was telling me today she feels very guilty because she doesn't want it to pass, even though it would be good for other reasons. So I think this was for Tom. What is the workforce development in 2J?
Yeah, they have a major emphasis on green workforce development. And it's, as I understand it, a kind of training program. They've awarded 2.6 million to 6 organizations like Denver Schools and Community College of Denver. And to create and expand clean energy jobs, focusing on outreach, education, upskilling, reskilling, free apprenticeships, and on-the-job training. Programs aim to reduce or eliminate the barriers to employment and focus on under-resourced communities, people of color, and workers from industries in transition. I think that's the best I can do.
Thank you. Jeanette, there was a question about 2J and 2K, so I guess Tom, you could answer too. Are these 2 taxes taken from property or sales?
Sales tax.
With their sales.
Sales and use tax. And I looked up what the difference is. A sales tax is what you pay when you pay to the retailer when you purchase something. A use tax is when you do not pay at the point of purchase, but you use it. And then it's charged to the consumer directly and not to the retailer. The retailer in a sales tax acts as a conduit for the government, but with a use tax, it goes directly to the consumer. And it's like, if you live out of the jurisdiction where the tax is applied, but you use it still after you've purchased it, you can be required to pay a use tax. But
I think that those are all the questions from the chat. Catherine
Berlin?
Yates. Sure. Mhm.
I had a question that I didn't,
Oh, sorry.
I don't think we were communicating.
Sorry. It was one committee for the whole city was the question in
Yes,
305.
yes, it's just the one overriding, who I think probably would be a lawyer, and then the 7 tenant committee. It would just be the one
Great.
committee.
So we have time for other questions. I also wanted to mention again, oh, here's one from Marcia, sorry. Again, it's about the sales tax. So you're off the hook now, Liz. So if one of those is from sales tax, which we normally do not support, is it fair to ask why the estimates for are so high, and should we support continuing at a higher than necessary rate?
well, I think that there's a situation where we can have a recession and the sales tax might not produce a great deal of money for these 2 different funds. And so if people still want to support climate action, some change and helping to reduce climate change, and then also, helping to work on the issue of homelessness, there would be a need for excess money or any money coming in if people want to support the issue.
Okay, Kathy Yates weighed in on compost costs. January 2023, we no longer pay for compost and we pay for trash, as Bobby was saying. Other questions? Anyone want to unmute and ask questions?
I think Bob is wrong about that. I can't believe people would be this.
I can hear you, Frank.
I was talking to myself. Sorry, I'll mute.
I have a question of yes on 21. Do
Sure.
you have any indication of what kind of support there is for this measure?
And first, let me say it's 2I. That's so
Oh, yes,
important.
right. Sorry.
Just want everyone, I think that there's very, very strong support in the city. And I think the hardest thing is getting the word out so that people know it's on the ballot and don't just stop with the judges and not continue down to where these issues are. We polled for this before the city council voted. They voted 12-1 for it, and the polling was at 69%. But that usually just goes down from there as you continue with the campaign and with the economy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, you all educated me on all the other things I have to vote on, so thank you.
Which is a great segue. That's what we try and do. Anything else before we sort of wrap it up?
On the lift limits on homeless resolution tax, I wonder how many homeless people this would affect approximately.
I don't have any numbers of individual people, Marge, how this would have, this would affect. I'm sorry.
I think that's an important thing to know.
Yes, I don't doubt that. The first time, the only facts that I was able to uncover were the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless had a great deal of information, and there wasn't too much in the press about this. Yes, knowing a percentage based on what base is important to know. Maybe we can find out what that is for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much to all of our presenters who also wrote and researched all these issues, which is great. I did want to mention too, as our members know, we have well-developed positions on that come from research and consensus on a large number of topics that come up through the local leagues, through the US League, and the full text of the positions can be found on our website under About the League Advocacy. So as part of this advocacy, we have come to consensus on whether to support, oppose, or neither support or oppose, nor oppose.
Oh, we change our hat.
Yes, we're
Changing
changing
our
our
hat
hat
right now. Okay.
to advocacy for a moment.
Okay.
So using relevant league positions. And so if you want to see what our advocacy is on these measures, you can find that on our website, the same place that I gave you the link before. The other thing I wanted to mention is Jeanette and Anne have a bunch of these, 3,000 English and 1,000 Spanish printed brochures, and we're looking for places that we can take ballot issues. So if you have any ideas, let Jeanette know, I believe, right, Jeanette? You're muted.
Yes, we're developing a plan for distribution, and we are down to 2,000 for English.
Great. All right, any last thoughts or comments? Don't forget tomorrow evening and that other date in November if you wanted to hear about the Colorado issues. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Berlin.
Okay.